Back on CBS Sports HQ with another look at CFP ranking number 3. The biggest change at the top. Georgia, with their second consecutive ranked victory, moves into that top spot from number 2, usurping Ohio State, who took care of business in kind, 38-3 over Michigan State, but they slide to number 2. At number 3, Michigan, the Wolverines, after taking care of business, a second half void of the pass. My issue? Nobody's asking, but if you were, 4-5 from Washington, man, I got something to say. Somewhere between poetry and pageantry, you will always find him, host of The Late Kick, Josh Pate, here to put words to the latest rankings. Josh, we're talking winners, losers. We're going to get to dangerous teams living right there below the surface. Let's start with the biggest winner here coming out of CFP ranking number 3. We saw some movement we expected. Is that where you go with your winner?
You know where I'm going, Musso? I'm going where everyone else goes for the loser. I have a strange sense Alabama actually ended up being a winner tonight, not because they've stayed at 8. I'm looking at their resume, okay, and let's just think forward amongst ourselves for a second, just you and I in the audience talking. If Bama beats Georgia, it's the only way this is relevant anyway. So if they beat Georgia, which is now our new number 1, and they add that onto a resume that includes then SEC champion, 1-loss win over Georgia, I'm looking at wins over 13 Ole Miss, 15 LSU, 17 Tennessee. So we're talking about top 20 wins there. And you're talking about your only loss being to Texas. I listened to the conversation between Uncle Dennis and Jerry and yourself a second ago. I don't know who it is that's going to get left out. I'm not sharp enough to deduce that for you. I'm just telling you flat out, I don't think the committee's leaving a 1-loss SEC champion out, especially when it's Alabama. And even though this shouldn't matter, doubly especially because that was a lot of the argument last year. Should Alabama have been in? I didn't think they should have been in last year, but it was still an argument. And that kind of lingers, I think, in the minds of committee members. Again, it shouldn't, but it does. So I actually think they're a winner, and I think everyone else is going to call them a loser tonight.
Yeah, I think sitting at 8, they are lying in wait to do exactly what we sometimes expect them to do. But if we end up in that scenario, somebody's getting the short end of the stick, and we have the underlying conversation of conference realignment surrounding all of this as well. It does not factor into the decision, but no doubt it will imply some of the conversation around it. Biggest loser in your eyes coming out of CFP3 is who?
Got to be Louisville, man. I mean, Louisville won over Notre Dame. Then they go and they lose to Pitt, predicted by the JP poll, by the way. But then think about this, Musso. So they're sitting there, and they've got Missouri, 2-loss Missouri ahead of them. And I think when we were watching it live on the monitor out here, you know, producer Jesse spoke up, and I kind of agree with him. He said, is that maybe an early indication about how much the committee values the brand of the SEC? And might that matter down the road, even in the case of an Alabama, for example? Might that matter down the road? Hey, what about this? What if Georgia were to just randomly lose to Tennessee this weekend, but then goes and beats Alabama, and they're a 1-loss SEC champ? So I tucked that away. But as for Louisville, you know, Louisville's a 1-loss team, and they're going to play Florida State, I guess, in the ACC championship game. Well, if they win that, if they win out, they're a 1-loss Power 5 champ. But it looks to me like they have maybe too steep a mountain to climb, especially when we're putting 2-loss teams in front of them. Now, I am a believer, as you know, in college football, you are not always what your record says you are. It's one of the big lies we tell about our sport. When your 2 losses are close to Georgia and close to LSU, I don't have any problem with them putting you in the top 10. But when you're ahead of me, if I'm Louisville, I don't get the warm fuzzies about what my future holds, even if I win out.
A tough slotting there, no doubt. Maybe a knee-jerk reaction to what we saw out of Mizzou. I want to take you to right that line of demarcation that there's going to be the argument about when it's all said and done. The 4-5 line. Florida State did nothing to impress this past week. Washington continued to take care of business. It felt like this was the moment we would see the flip and then let the chips fall where they may from here on out. Where do you fall on Washington right now? What do they have to do outside of a conference championship to find themselves on the right side of the line?
They don't have to do anything else but win out. I think that's a right answer. What's interesting is you mentioned the margin of victory. We're seeing it with Washington. We're seeing it with Florida State. And there's a difference in what we're seeing out of Georgia and Alabama. Georgia, Bama are supremely talented and well-coached teams, but they've been there before. They've got the pedigree, and therefore they're doing this right here. They're starting to scale their performance in November because they've breathed the air before. Washington has not. No one associated with that program right now, at least, has breathed November playoff air. Ditto with Florida State, and that's why you're seeing a lot of one-possession wins. Texas is the same way, Musso. Those folks are here for the first time. And so my opinion about Washington is because they got a goose egg in the loss column, they keep winning, they'll be in. But, man, they're an underdog. They're a point spread underdog to 2-loss Oregon State. I'm going to be at the game Saturday night, and I'm really interested because this is a team in Washington whose last half-dozen games they've won by 10 points or less. So it's been a string after they blew out teams early. You start with that Oregon game, you look at their schedule all the way up until present day. They've been winning by the skin of their teeth. Now, as long as they keep winning, they're okay. But, man, they got Washington, or they got Oregon probably still to come. And that's if they scoot by an Oregon State, for example, this week. So it's treacherous. It's treacherous times right now. Look, I know we're debating a lot of this stuff right now. I think it's going to work itself out because there's no way you keep seeing Texas scoot by and Florida State scoot by and Washington scoot by and all that chalk hold. Some of it's not chalk. Like I just said, Washington's a dog this week. So I think it's going to take care of itself. That's why I got no problem telling you I think Bama's a winner because I think a lot of the fog's going to lift and there's going to be a spot for them if they keep winning.
Yeah, the committee still with one eyebrow raised when looking at Washington right now. It shall sort itself out, and someone's going to be unhappy. Not our guy Josh Pate. He covers it all. Appreciate you. All right, here's a look at the odds to win the title. Michigan, still the odds-on favorite. Behind that run game, behind that defense. That defense does harken thoughts of what Georgia was in years past, but the Bulldogs' defense appears to be gelling at the right time as well. Plus 250, second shortest odds at 2.5 to 1. Then you got to listen to our guy Josh Pate because the Crimson Tide, next closest at 7.5 to 1. Currently ranked 8th in the college football playoff rankings, but that tells you what Vegas thinks. It's going to be Bama taking care of business. I don't know how that reconciles with Georgia ending up there as well in those rankings, but the odds makers protecting themselves to the brand names here. Goes Michigan, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State. All right, here's a look at your marquee matchups in Week 12 in the Big Ten. Michigan will look to maybe implement a bit of the forward pass. 19.5-point favorites on the road against Maryland with all of what's happening there in the headlines with their head coach. Going to have more news on Friday. Number 1, Georgia, the new number 1. 10.5, interesting number. On the road, tough place to play against Tennessee, known for the upset in years past. Minnesota and Ohio State doing battle. Ohio State in need of some style points. Maybe that makes you feel a certain way about the 27.5. Washington still slotted at 5 when you thought they might be 4. And as Josh Pate told you, 2.5-point dogs on the road to number 11 Oregon State, who has impressed this season as well. But if you want to be a CFP team, you got to take care of that type of business. Texas on the road against the Cyclones.